The early morning sun crept through the slatted blinds, casting thin blades of light across Leonard Lynch's weathered face. A deep, rattling cough shook his frame, flecks of crimson staining his hands. Concern etched lines around his eyes as he studied the bloody evidence under the harsh bathroom glare. With a weary sigh, he rinsed the viscous liquid away, watching it swirl down the porcelain basin. His gaze met the mirror, confronting a man whose rugged features belied the gravity weighing upon him. Steeling himself, Lynch retreated to the bedroom, deft fingers working the buttons of his crisp white shirt. The frayed edges of his khaki trench coat brushed against calloused hands as he secured the garment, a constant companion shielding him from the world's harsh realities. His ring finger bore the mark of a life once consumed by temptation, the Chinese symbol for devil, a grim reminder of where those serpentine paths could lead. Each measured step through the living area echoed with memories, the familiar surroundings a haunting vestige of what once was. An ache blossomed in his chest as Lynch's hat slipped from his grasp, his trembling fingers lingering over the images of his late wife, Lucille. Her radiant smile a cruel juxtaposition to the emptiness that pervaded his soul. The solitary journey to the cemetery provided no solace, only a bitter reminder of what he had lost. Kneeling before Lucille's grave, Lynch gently placed the sunflowers atop the polished granite, their vibrant petals a fleeting testament to the love they once shared. His calloused thumb brushed over the etched letters, as if he could will them to rearrange, to rewrite the cruel fate that stole her from him. "Sorry, honey. Work as usual." The words rang hollow, even to his own ears. With a resigned nod, he rasped, "Happy anniversary." The bitterness of those two words like ash on his tongue. As the screen of his phone blinked with the unrelenting march of time, Lynch turned his back on the grave, the weight of his solitude pressing harder upon his shoulders with every step. The jet's tires kissed the tarmac with a screech of protest, the roar of its engines fading as it lumbered towards its gate. A black SUV idled at the curb as Lynch emerged, the stoic driver wordlessly gesturing for him to enter. Gripping the worn handle of his suitcase tighter, Lynch steeled himself for whatever awaited, the scent of stale smoke clinging to the fabric a grim portent. The tinted windows shielded Lynch from prying eyes as the sleek black SUV glided through the city streets. The driver's gaze flickered to the rearview mirror, his rugged features mirroring Lynch's own, a kindred spirit bound by the indelible marks seared into their flesh, the Chinese symbol for devil, a stark reminder of their interwoven fates. "You need help, my friend?" The gruff inquiry hung in the air, laced with a familiarity that hinted at a shared history. Lynch's fingers tightened around the worn leather of his suitcase. "No, this is everything." A curt nod acknowledged the clipped response as the vehicle merged into the flow of traffic. "Where to?" "Downtown, Sheraton Hotel." Lynch paused, his brow furrowing. "Shouldn't you already know that?" The driver's eyes met his in the mirror, a ghost of a smirk playing across his lips. "Yes, I'm just checking. You know, we could have all your material here waiting for you. I like to do things my way." The finality in Lynch's tone left no room for argument, his jawline tightening beneath the shadow of his fedora. The grand facade of the Sheraton loomed ahead, its polished facades a beacon amidst the urban sprawl. Lynch's footfalls echoed through the opulent lobby, his suitcase trailing behind like a loyal hound as he strode past the reception desk, unfazed by the scrutinizing gazes that trailed in his wake. The elevator chimed its arrival, and Lynch ushered himself inside, his finger jabbing the button for the 4th floor. As the digital numbers flickered upward, his gaze remained fixed, a steely resolve etched into the creases of his weathered countenance. A whisper of movement caught his attention as the doors parted. A figure clad in black, a wide-brimmed hat obscuring his features, slipped inside. Lynch's eyes narrowed, instinctively assessing the potential threat. "Can you hit 6?" The stranger's tone was nonchalant, but Lynch detected an undercurrent of something more. With a curt nod, He obliged, his finger hovering over the illuminated button. "Nice fedora, old-timer." Lynch bristled at the mocking lilt, his jaw clenching as he turned to face the insolent newcomer. "Thanks, kid." The mischievous gleam in the stranger's eyes betrayed his amusement. "Is there any place to get a drink around here?" Deflecting the inquiry with a dismissive shrug, Lynch muttered, "I'm not from around here." The smirk widened, a challenge sparking in those flinty eyes. "Sure, you're not." Refusing to rise to the bait, Lynch shifted his gaze forward, his posture taut with restrained tension. "Where from?" The clipped response slipped from his lips like a well-worn mantra. "Out of town." The elevator lurched to a halt, the metallic screech of the doors parting, shattering the charged silence. As Lynch stepped across the threshold, he cast one final glance over his shoulder. "See ya, kid." The sardonic curl of the stranger's lips lingered in his periphery. "You bet." The muffled thud of Lynch's footsteps echoed through the hushed corridor as he prowled towards room 409, his keen gaze flitting over the numbered placards adorning each door. Slipping a hand beneath the folds of his trench coat, calloused fingers curled around the smooth plastic of a keycard, swiping it deftly through the lock. The mechanism released its grip with a metallic buzz, granting him entry. A hush descended as he slipped inside, the heavy door sealing out the muted din of the hallway. Lynch's hat found a temporary home atop the console table, his suitcase thudding heavily against the mattress as he divested himself of its weight. With deft motions, the latches sprang open, revealing an array of specialized equipment nestled within. A manila folder joining the clutter on the coffee table, while the unmistakable silhouettes of silenced firearms lay in grim repose. Retrieving the orbiter electronic listening device, Lynch set it beside the folder, his thumb caressing the switch as a burst of static crackled to life. Slowly, methodically, he swept the room, scrutinizing every nook and cranny for any hint of an unwelcome presence. The bedside lamps flickered as he lifted the shades, his gaze probing beneath the mattress. A grimace ghosted across his features as he rose, his hand massaging the small of his back in a futile attempt to alleviate the dull ache. "Oh." The bathroom beckoned, and Lynch obliged, flicking on the harsh fluorescent glare to better scrutinize the tiled sanctuary. Satisfied, he retreated, his senses attuned to the ebb and flow of muffled voices filtering through the device's speakers. A sudden beep rents the air, shattering the fragile silence. Lynch's head snapped towards the door, his body coiled with pent-up tension. Mere feet away, Allison Stout reclined in her chair, the pages of a worn novel cradled in her delicate fingers. The soft whisper of fabric caressed her skin as she shifted, her bare feet emerging from discarded heels to flex and relieve the tension. "Hey, Paul." Her voice lilted, casual yet laced with an undercurrent of familiarity. "What took so long?" Lynch's focus sharpened, his entire being straining to decipher the indistinct murmurs bleeding through the device's tinny speakers. "There was a break in the case." Paul's rumbling tones carried a weary edge as he shrugged off his jacket, the garment crumpling atop the bedspread. Allison arched a perfectly sculpted brow. "How so?" "One of the defendants just killed himself." A pregnant pause hung between them before Paul continued, his words clipped. "Jules Taradico. He was one of Louis C.'s guys. The detective that was undercover." Allison's interjection cut him off, her tone laced with grim understanding. A curt nod punctuated Paul's affirmation. "Yeah, he was found in the woods. He hung himself." Across the corridor, Lynch's mouth contorted in a silent grimace, his fingers clenching into white-knuckled fists. "Wow." Allison's breath escaped in a soft rush, her eyes widening at the harrowing revelation. "That is breaking news. First the crucifixion of Isaias Eschert, and now a suicide." With a fluid grace, she rose, bending at the waist to retrieve her files from the depths of her bag. Paul's gaze lingered a fraction too long, drinking in the swell of her curves. "Let me get my files." Her words were muffled as she rifled through the scattered documents, loose pages fluttering. "You know, with all this additional information, we can put Louis C. and his entire hitmen behind bars for a long time." A wolfish grin etched itself across Lynch's weathered features as the implication sank in, his thumb absently tracing the raised edges of his tattoo. "Oblivious to the eavesdropper's presence," Allison continued, her voice lilting with a mixture of triumph and trepidation. "It's not like they're hard to find. He makes them get his symbol tattooed on their ring finger." Lynch stilled, his ministrations faltering as realization dawned. "It's like they're married to him," Allison mused with a wry chuckle, her eyes flicking up to meet Paul's heated gaze. He shifted, clearing his throat as he tore his focus from the enticing swell of her cleavage. "I think it's to symbolize them being married to the job." Their laughter mingled, the undercurrent of tension palpable before Allison's teeth sank into her plush lower lip. Paul hastily averted his stare, swiping a hand across his brow as he busied himself with cuffing his sleeves. "You know, most of these guys can't handle prison." His tone sobered, tinged with a grim pragmatism. "A lot of them are ancient. I'm surprised we've gotten this far." "While you were out, your wife called." Paul's brow furrowed, his confusion evident. "My wife." The weight of old memories bore down upon Lynch as his gaze grew distant, the voices filtering through the device fading into white noise. A floodgate burst open, sweeping him away on a tide of recollection. Lucille's delicate hands tended to the sunflowers, replenishing the vase's water before she set about arranging the plates on their small dining table, each motion imbued with a tenderness that twisted the knife of regret deeper into Lynch's soul. Her voice, a melody he had taken for granted, lilted through their apartment. "I hope you're hungry. Dinner should be done any minute now." But he brushed past her, oblivious, his mind consumed by the siren call of his work. In the bedroom, the suitcase gaped open, swallowing the tools of his trade with each methodical placement. Clothing, silenced firearms, all expertly packed with the ease of routine. The dresser drawer slid open with a rasp, and Lynch's calloused fingers curled around the simple gold band he had vowed to cherish, studying its luster in the waning light before pocketing it with a weary sigh. "Leonard, come taste this stew. Yum. It's so good." Lucille's voice drifted in from the kitchen, rife with a hopefulness that gutted him. Her footfalls echoed through the hallway, her brow creasing with concern as she called out, "Leonard, where are you going? Dinner is almost done." Lynch kept his gaze averted, unable, unwilling, to meet those warm eyes he knew would plead with him to stay. "Lucy, I have to work." The plaintive catch in her voice sliced through his feigned indifference. "It's almost 8 o'clock. I've been cooking for hours. Couldn't you have told me earlier?" The platitudes fell hollow, even to his own ears. "Lucy, we went over this time and time again." "But Leonard..." He cut off her protest with a chaste kiss to her brow, the tender gesture a blasphemous consolation as he turned his back and strode out the door, suitcase in hand. Lynch blinked, the ghosts of the past dissolving like smoke as his surroundings reasserted themselves. Scrubbing a hand over his craggy features, he refocused on the manila folder, flicking it open to reveal the dossiers tucked within. Across the hall, Ali soon confirmed, "Yeah, it sounded urgent." "All right, give me a minute." Paul's clipped tones betrayed his distraction as he excused himself. "No worries." With a weary sigh, Lynch settled into the chair, his eyes roving over the neatly typed reports detailing the darkly intertwined lives of the two agents. A sharp pang lanced through his chest as Paul's muffled voice reached his ears. "Honey, it's Daddy. Can I talk to Mommy?" A pause, then, "Soon, baby doll." The casual endearment was a sucker punch, driving the air from Lynch's lungs with its bittersweet simplicity. "Hey, honey, is everything all right?" Paul's tone took on an edge of trepidation. What? Oh no, don't tell me that. Lynch could practically see the anguish etched into the other man's features as he swallowed hard. Well, I'll try my best to come back. A futile promise, belied by the tremor in his voice. Okay, love you too. Bye. The line went dead, and Lynch found himself leaning forward, his entire being straining to catch those hushed words that Paul now imparted to his partner. Is everything okay? A weighted pause stretched between them before Paul's hollow admission. No. The anguish was palpable, even though the barrier separating them. My grandfather just died. As Paul retreated to the bed, putting his back to Allison in a vain attempt to shield his vulnerability, Lynch's jaw tightened, his fingers clenching into white-knuckled fists. Oh, I'm sorry. Me too. The rawness in Paul's voice was like a physical blow. I wanted to take him to a ball game when I got back. Allison's murmur of shared grief hung heavy in the air. Oh, he was the only one who got me. You know what I mean? The words tumbled forth in a ragged rush, stripped of all pretense. I can't talk to my wife. My kid is too young. I've been neglecting them for months now. Lynch's mouth twisted in a bitter approximation of a smile as he shook his head slowly. You sound like me, kid. His tone took on a wistful edge as he rumbled, What I wouldn't give to see you again, Lucy. Oblivious to the eavesdropper's presence, Paul persisted in laying bare his innermost torment. I only got married because, we had to, because of the baby and all. Another pause, weighted with unspoken regrets. I don't know what I'm going to do now. Allison's gentle prompting cut through the tension, urging him to continue. What do you mean? Lynch inched closer to the partition separating the rooms, his fingers splayed against the plaster, as Paul turned to face his partner, his expression one of haunted anguish. I spend more time at work than I do at home. I wish they weren't in my life. Lynch recoiled as if struck, his brow furrowing as self-loathing roiled within him. I should take this guy out right now. Yet even as the words slipped from his lips, a part of him recognized the kindred despair echoed in Paul's ragged confession. He watched, unmoving, as Paul propped a pillow against the headboard, Allison perching on the edge of the bed, her files splayed haphazardly around her. But they are, she murmured, her tone gentle yet laced with steel. It wasn't a question, but a simple statement of fact that hung between them. I know. Paul's assent was barely more than an exhalation, punctuated by a grim finality. I have to go home. Allison's reaction was immediate, her brow furrowing as she protested. What about the case? For a stretch, only silence answered her until Paul rasped, My family needs me. The weight of those words reverberated through Lynch like a shockwave, his gaze snapping to his own haggard reflection in the mirror. The ravages of time and regret had etched their toll, carving deep grooves into his craggy visage. That's what I did to you, huh, Lucille? His voice was little more than a hoarse rasp as his fingers traced the planes of his face, as if seeking some remnant of the man he had once been. When you needed me most, I wasn't there for you. His jaw clenched, tendons straining beneath the weathered skin as the recrimination washed over him in an acrid tide. I wish I could go back. My biggest regret is taking every moment with you for granted. In the mirror, his eyes shone with anguish too long suppressed, the weight of that single damning realization crushing the air from his lungs. I've missed a lot. The words fell in gut-wrenching synchronicity from both men's lips, slicing through the divide between their disparate realities to converge on that singular, brutal truth. With a slow exhale, Lynch tore his gaze away from the haunting mirror, his fingers instinctively seeking the solace of the past. Calloused fingertips brushed against the worn photograph tucked within his coat, a fleeting captured moment where love's radiant warmth had banished the shadows dimming his world. Lucille's smile blazed forth from the image, her eyes alight with a joy so profound it lanced straight through to Lynch's battered soul. Those sun-kissed features were the last tether, anchoring him to the man he had once been before the inexorable march of his demons had subsumed that fragile happiness beneath a tide of regret and self-destruction. The memory washed over him with all the searing poignancy of a brand. Dappled sunlight filtered through the canopy of leaves as Lynch cradled Lucille's face in his work-roughened palms. Her eyes slipped shut, basking in the tender affection of his kiss against her brow, as the world around them seemed to still, if only for a crystalline moment. In that sliver of stolen tranquility, he had been whole, truly alive in a way his current existence could never replicate. With a grimace, Lynch blinked away the reverie, returning the cherished photograph to its resting place with a weary resignation. "Enough's enough," he rasped, the words carrying the weight of a vow long overdue. "I know that now." Pivoting on his heel, he crossed to the bed in 3 long strides, his fingers curling around the handle of the battered suitcase as he lifted it. The unmistakable shapes of his silenced firearms lay in silent testament to the path he had chosen, the life of violence and deception that had ultimately cost him everything. "You never knew how close you came." The murmured words hung in the air, more plea than threat, as Lynch's gaze bored into the flimsy partition, separating him from the oblivious agents. With a shake of his head, he tucked away the listening device and secured the case, shrugging into his coat with mechanical efficiency. The door's handle was cool against his palm as he pulled it open, only to pause, his brow furrowing as he patted the emptiness atop his head. Retreating into the room, Lynch scooped up the battered fedora, cradling it for a heartbeat before settling it into place with a familiarity born from years of habit. His fingertips traced the contours of the wallpapered plaster, as if committing every ridge and imperfection to memory through tactile exploration alone. Everyone should get a second chance. The declaration carried the weight of a man's dying wish as he finally turned away, squaring his shoulders as he passed through the threshold and into the hallway beyond. No sooner had his foot crossed that invisible boundary than a figure emerged from the shadows, all harsh lines and menacing purpose as the metallic rasp of a firearm. Breaching rent the stillness of the corridor. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as the gunman, that insouciant stranger from the elevator, leveled the barrel directly at Lynch's chest. The world tunneled to a pinprick of clarity as the muzzle flashed, the roar of the detonation swallowed by an eerie stillness. With a dull thump, Lynch's hat tumbled from his head, spinning lazily through the arid air as he crumpled backward, scarlet blossoming across the crisp fabric of his shirt like a grotesque flower unfurling its petals. The last vestige of light faded from his eyes as oblivion's cloak descended, cutting off the ragged gasp that might have been Lucille's name on his bloodied lips.